I stood by the window, watching the sunlight stretch across my mother's perfect white driveway. The lawn was still trimmed like it hadn't snowed the night before. Because in this house, even the weather knew better than to make a mess on Cressida Vale's front yard. Inside, everything looked like it belonged on the cover of a catalog. A fire crackled in the hearth, not too loud, not too dim. The tree stood tall and over-decorated in the far corner of the living room. Every ornament coordinated. Every gift matched the gold and red scheme my mother dictated in October. My name wasn't on the gift tags, but I'd stopped noticing that years ago. I was used to existing here without acknowledgement. You can only be called dramatic so many times before you decide to stop auditioning for the part. Astria Wynne, my brother-in-law, stood near the drinks table, laughing too easily. I didn't trust anyone who laughed that quickly when no one was telling jokes. I kept to myself, sipping tepid cider from a mug that still smelled faintly like cinnamon and disinfectant. I wasn't here for the decor. I was here for Narina. My daughter needed to feel normal for once, even if it meant letting her play pretend inside a family who never quite accepted her, or me. And then I saw it. A box under the tree, medium-sized, shiny foil wrapping, nothing unusual at first, but it didn't have a name tag. That wouldn't have been strange except every other gift did. Every single one. In this house, my mother kept a spreadsheet of who gave what to whom. This box was the outlier. I walked toward it slowly. Something about the shape. It wasn't standard. And then I saw the fold in the wrapping paper. Just a small crease, but enough to expose a faint printed logo I recognized instantly. I froze. I'd seen that logo 2 months ago, on a PDF attached to a police report. It belonged to a supplier of surveillance gear. Not household cameras. The kind you hide in clocks, vents, stuffed animals, the kind used in custody disputes or worse. That box didn't belong here. I bent down and touched the corner gently. I didn't unwrap it. I didn't need to. My breath tightened in my chest, not from panic, but from memory. I'd scrolled past the supplier name 3 times before I finally connected the dot that day. A girl had filed a complaint, barely 12. Said someone had planted something in her bedroom. No proof, no follow-up. I hadn't forgotten. My job didn't let me forget. And then Elowen saw it. She had been chasing one of the younger cousins, laughing, cheeks flushed. But the second her eyes landed on the box, everything changed. She stopped running. Her shoulders stiffened. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She grabbed Isolde's wrist with both hands, clinging like she was about to fall. I recognized that fear, the kind that wrapped around your throat without ever being named. Elowen leaned into her mother's ear. I couldn't hear what she said, but Isolde brushed it off, shushing her too fast, too casually. I stepped forward, but before I could say anything, my mother swooped in behind me like a wind I didn't ask for. "Darling," she sang, "could you not stand in the way of the tree? It blocks the photos." Of course, God forbid the fear on Elowen's face ruined the Christmas aesthetic. I backed off, but I didn't walk away. A few minutes later, Astria wandered by. He gave me a nod that looked more like a smirk. "You okay, Lumi?" he asked. "You've got that courtroom stare going again." I said nothing. I wasn't about to explain to him what he already knew. Isolde joined in. "It's probably a neighbor's gift," she said lightly. "You know how Mom lets people drop things off?" No, I didn't know that, because it wasn't true. No one got inside this house unless they were on the list, and even the list had a list. I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled, the kind of smile you learn in law school, the one that holds its breath until the right moment. Cressida walked by again and added, "She's been this way since she was a little girl, always seeing ghosts where there were shadows." I wanted to turn around and ask her what she saw when I brought home real bruises at 17, but I didn't. I watched instead. The room buzzed around me. Laughter. Crinkling paper. Music looping through a holiday jazz playlist my mom swore she didn't like, but always played anyway. Narina was busy helping a cousin assemble a toy. For a moment, I let myself believe we could just get through the day. And then, Grandpa Seraphine was handed the box. He looked delighted. "What's this?" he chuckled, balancing his teacup on the armrest. My breath stopped. My mother clapped her hands gently. "From a secret Santa," she said, smiling. "Secret Santa? Since when?" I watched Grandpa place the box in his lap and start peeling the tape. Every second dragged. And I remember thinking, if I didn't act now, we'd never come back from what was about to happen. Grandpa's hands fumbled with the wrapping paper, his fingers slow but deliberate, as if unwrapping something sacred. The rest of the room watched with idle smiles. No one thought twice. I did. I always did. But this time, it wasn't just a hunch. The moment his thumb pierced the corner tape, I caught a glimpse of the family portrait hanging in the hallway just behind him. Something about it made me pause. I stepped closer. It took me a second to register the shift. My face wasn't there. The original photo had been cropped, not resized, cropped. It had been taken 3 years ago at the same tree, the same couch in the background. I remembered the sweater I wore. I remembered holding Narina on my lap. But now, that version of the photo was gone, replaced with a tighter frame, as if I'd never been in it. I stood there, breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. I wasn't part of the family's story unless I stayed silent. That was always the unspoken deal. Grandpa peeled another layer of paper, a glint of silver underneath. That logo, the same one I'd seen in the police briefing. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't from any neighbor. It was deliberate. Something snapped. I moved before I thought, crossing the room and reaching out just as he was about to lift the lid. My hand landed squarely on the box. "Stop," I said, clear but calm. No dramatics, no hysteria. Grandpa looked startled, but not angry. He blinked at me like I was a stranger. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, holding onto the lid. "It's just a present." Before I could respond, Astria's voice cut through the space like a whip. "Don't touch what isn't yours." He wasn't smiling anymore. His tone was sharp, louder than it needed to be. It sliced the room in half. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Even the playlist shifted to silence between tracks. I didn't move. I kept my hand on the box. "It doesn't have a tag," I said. "I want to know where it came from." My mother was the first to break the moment. "Luminara," she sighed, her voice teetering on theatrical. "Must you always turn everything into a federal case?" Isolde added, "It's Christmas. For God's sake, can we just enjoy one peaceful moment?" "Peaceful for who?" I asked. The room turned. It always did. "You always think something's wrong," someone muttered. "Just let Grandpa open his gift," came another voice from the kitchen. I caught Narina's eyes across the room. She looked worried but said nothing. Then a small tug on my coat. "Narina." "Mom," she whispered. "They didn't call me for the choir. The other kids had scripts. I didn't get one." My head turned sharply. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, biting her lip. "Miss Donna said I must have forgotten mine, but she looked weird when she said it." It clicked. The swapped script, the gift, the photo. All of it. When they can't control you, they try to erase you. My voice didn't shake, but something inside me did. "I'm taking this outside," I said. I lifted the box. Grandpa didn't protest. No one tried to stop me, just watched like I was walking out with a bomb. I stepped out into the freezing air. The sudden bite of the wind felt like relief. At least it was honest. My fingers were stiff but sure as I pulled out my phone. I found the number, local dispatch, and pressed call. The dial tone barely rang twice. 911, what's your emergency?" I took a breath, stared down at the box. "Yes," I said, voice even. "I'd like to report something suspicious. It's about a gift, and a little girl who's too afraid to speak." The car was freezing, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, hands stiff on the steering wheel, breath fogging up the windshield while the warmth inside the house pulsed through the windows like a different world. Narina was in the back seat, cross-legged, coloring quietly with a broken crayon she'd found under the seat. She didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. She knew. Christmas music spilled out from the living room, slightly muffled but still clear enough to make out the melody, some sanitized jazz rendition of "Deck the Halls." The irony wasn't lost on me. That song had always irritated me with its forced cheer. Now it made my skin crawl. My phone sat face up on the console. I watched the screen, waiting for the number I'd just called to appear again. Nothing yet. I didn't know what kind of response to expect, but a part of me was hoping they'd arrive soon, before the family spun the story into something else. My eyes drifted to the dashboard, but my mind went somewhere else. Last year, same house, same playlist, same forced smiles. That was the year my cousin Micah suddenly transferred schools in January. No one said much, just that his grades had slipped, that he needed a fresh start. But I remembered how he barely spoke at the dinner table that night, how he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, especially Astria's. At the time, I'd asked Isolde if she noticed anything. She'd waved me off with that same tight-lipped smile. "Don't start drama over nothing," she'd said. So I hadn't. I'd dropped it. I'd convinced myself maybe I was wrong, but I wasn't. When people deny the same thing long enough, they start to believe the silence is proof of innocence. And that's how it lives, right there in the quiet. The car's vents made a soft clicking sound as they adjusted, even though I hadn't turned them on. Narina tugged at her sleeve, curling into herself just slightly. She didn't complain about the cold. She never did. I reached for my coat pocket and pulled out the name tag I'd been given when we arrived. Everyone had one. Mom said it made photo tagging easier. Most were elegant, scripted, glossy cardstock tucked into gold-trimmed holders. Mine? It said youngest. No name, just the title I never asked for and couldn't shed. They didn't forget. They just didn't think it mattered. I stared at it for a few seconds, then pulled my phone into my lap and opened the camera. First, I snapped a photo of the name tag, then the box still sitting in the passenger seat, unopened, untouched. I turned slightly, catching the window's reflection of the cropped family portrait in the hallway. I zoomed in and captured that, too. Not because I wanted a record for social media, not because I wanted to prove something to the world, but because I might need to prove it to a court. Or to myself. Documentation isn't paranoia. It's survival. I opened my encrypted folder, the one labeled Family Incidents. Inside were dates, screenshots, voice memos. I wasn't hoping to use it, but I'd prepared, just in case. People don't become dangerous overnight. They evolve in plain sight. The silence in the car started to press against my ribs. I scrolled to the list I'd kept. Odd comments, dismissive glances, things Narina had said that didn't make sense until they did. My phone buzzed. I jumped, even though I didn't show it. Narina looked up, crayon still in her hand. The number wasn't saved. No name, just a single message. "Don't be stupid. You still have time to back off." I stared at it. No punctuation, no signature. Nothing about it screamed Astria, and yet it screamed him in every way. I didn't flinch. I didn't show Narina the message, but I felt her eyes on me. "Is someone trying to scare you?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was, they weren't trying to scare me. They were just trying to keep the pattern alive. The phone rang less than 3 minutes after I hung up. "Ma'am, we've dispatched a unit to your location. Officers are 5 minutes out." The dispatcher's voice was clipped, efficient. I blinked. That was fast. "We don't usually expedite holiday calls unless there's a history," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Your address flagged with a note, not from you." I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. Someone else had seen something, someone who couldn't or wouldn't speak until now. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. But I felt heat behind my eyes. Not fear, not anger, relief. I wasn't the only one watching, I whispered to myself, slipping the phone into my coat pocket. Narina looked up from the back seat. "Mom?" "We're going back inside," I said, my voice calm. "Just for a moment." I didn't wait for her to answer. I opened the door and stepped out, box still in hand. The cold slapped my skin, but I didn't flinch. I didn't rush either. Let them watch. The house, with all its twinkling lights and curated joy, seemed even more artificial now. A set on a stage, the lines already written. I pushed the door open and walked in, the sound of carols swelling around me like a defense. Grandpa was still in his chair, eyes half closed, the teacup on the table beside him untouched. He looked tired, almost dazed, like none of this registered anymore. I walked past him, past the tree, toward the kitchen. I didn't speak, but I felt Astria's eyes tracking me across the room. When I turned slightly, I caught his expression, a smile. But his fingers, white-knuckled, gripping the back of a dining chair, told another story. I wasn't making a scene. I was documenting one. I turned into the kitchen and nearly collided with my mother. Cressida always looked polished. That day was no different. Her makeup was fresh, her jewelry perfectly understated, her sweater matching the theme of the tree. But her eyes, those never softened. "Luminara," she said, not as a greeting, but as a warning. I waited. She leaned in, her voice low and condescending. "If you want attention, sweetie, there are healthier ways. You don't have to hijack Christmas every year." The box pressed harder into my side. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. She tried again. "It's exhausting for everyone. Honestly, it's a little sad." I remembered the first time she said I was too much. I was 12. I'd cried at a cousin's funeral and made people uncomfortable. She told me to stop making a scene. I thought it meant I should shrink. I spent years trying. Now I understood. I wasn't too much. They were too little. I brushed past her without another word. Back in the main room, I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. I didn't hit record just yet, but I had my thumb on the button. Not because I wanted to catch some dramatic outburst, but because I knew how these things unfolded. Tone, timing, volume. It wasn't about what was said, it was how. A shadow passed the front window. A squad car, right on time. I took a step toward the front door. "Don't," Astria said from behind me. His voice was low but tight, controlled but barely. I turned around. He was closer now. His smile was gone. "You're going to embarrass everyone," he said. "You already did that," I replied, soft but steady. Narina's footsteps thudded quickly down the hallway. She reached me, breath shallow. "Mom!" Her eyes were wide. "Uncle Astria just threw something in the fireplace." I looked past her. Over her shoulder, faint smoke curled from the living room hearth. Not firewood, not scented kindling, something else. And in that moment, I knew what he'd destroyed wasn't just a box. It was time. The moment Narina whispered those words into my coat, Uncle Astria threw something in the fireplace. I didn't blink. I moved. Crossing the room felt like wading through molasses. No one spoke. The laughter had dried up hours ago, replaced with the clink of glasses and the kind of surface politeness only families like mine could maintain under siege. I reached the hearth just in time to see the last edge of wrapping paper curl and blacken into ash. Sparks hissed upward like the fireplace was laughing at me. All that remained was a faintly melted corner of something shiny. Plastic? No, metal. Too small to be harmless. And then I saw it, a smudge, not soot, a barcode, charred but intact, faint but there. I stepped closer. My fingers hovered near the hearth but didn't touch it. It wasn't just wrapping paper, it was product packaging. I turned slowly, standing straighter. My voice didn't rise. "What did you burn?" I asked, loud enough for the room. Astria didn't flinch. And he leaned against the mantel, arms crossed like nothing happened. "You're losing it, Lumi," he said. That nickname, that forced affection, he hadn't used it in years. Not since I stopped smiling when he did. "What was in the box?" He shrugged, but there was something off in the ease. "You think you know everything," he said, his tone more clipped now. "But you never know the full story, do you?" I could feel eyes on us now. Isolda's hand gripping her wineglass, Cressida stiff in the doorway, Grandpa still seated, staring at the fire like it had answers. The children were being herded into the back room, but Elowen had started to cry. Vera was holding her tightly, lips pressed into a line so thin it looked painful. And still, no one asked the real question. Cressida stepped forward first, the matriarch reborn in pearls and performance. "Enough!" she snapped, pointing a manicured finger at me like she was swatting at static. "This is not the place for your crusade, Luminara," I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Then maybe this isn't the place for your silence. Isolde finally exploded, voice high and cracked. You're ruining everything, she shouted, stepping between me and Astria. And that's when it happened. A glass of wine tipped, maybe by accident, maybe not, and spilled across the holiday tablecloth in a long, blooming stain. The deep red spread like a wound, bright against the white linen and gold placemats. No one moved to clean it. I took a step back, just once, then pulled out my phone. If the truth ruins your holiday, I said, maybe the holiday was a lie to begin with. I scrolled, pulled up my photo folder. I didn't wave it around. I didn't need to. I turned the screen to face Isolde. First the photo of the barcode, then the name tag they gave me that read only youngest, and finally the hallway picture, cropped like I'd never existed. She looked away. A cough. Quiet. From the back corner of the room, Vera cleared her throat. She's not crazy, she said, voice quiet but certain. She's careful. Silence again, the kind that buzzes inside your ears when the room is too loud with things unsaid. Even Grandpa didn't defend anyone. He just stared at the smoldering fireplace, the tea on his tray untouched. I turned toward the window and saw it, a cruiser, slowing down as it approached the curb. No lights, no sirens, just steady and deliberate. The doorbell rang. I stepped toward it, but before I reached the handle, Cressida grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, fingers tight with something more than fear, something closer to fury. If you bring them into this house, she said, teeth clenched, you are no longer welcome in it. I looked her in the eyes. Then it's time you knew who you raised. The door creaked open before I reached it. 2 officers stepped inside, not rushed, not hesitant, just focused. They scanned the room like they'd walked into a stage set, already knowing the script. Their presence alone shifted something. The air thinned. People who had been loud a moment ago suddenly found something on the floor to look at. Afternoon, the lead officer said, voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the tension. We received a report of a potential incident involving a minor. We'd like to speak with the reporting party. I stepped forward before anyone else could try to hijack the moment. That's me, I said. There's something you should see. I believe a child is in danger. Behind me, I could feel Cressida's disapproval manifest like heat. She didn't say a word, but I heard the scoff in her breath. She had always preferred control through decorum. Astria was the first to move, toward Elowin. He walked slowly, almost casually, crouching near her. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly. Why don't we go find your mom? And that's when it happened. The dog, Ollie, rose from his usual spot under the table, teeth bared, growling low and primal. He didn't bark. He just stood there, unmoving, eyes locked on Astria. The room froze. Ollie had known Astria for years. I'd seen that dog sleep at his feet, chase balls he threw, nuzzle his hands. Not once had he ever growled at him. Until now, Astria stiffened, but didn't back away. Stupid dog, he muttered. Grandpa rose slowly from his armchair, wobbling as he approached. He's probably just confused, he offered weakly. Too many people in one place. Even his voice shook. That told me everything. One of the officers cleared his throat. We'd like to review any home surveillance footage from today, if that's available, he said. Cressida stepped forward, finally finding her voice. Surely that's not necessary. This is a misunderstanding. You know how holidays can get heightened. The officer didn't even look at her. He spoke directly to me. Was the gift still intact when you brought it outside? I shook my head. No, it had already been opened, then burned. Burned? He repeated, brows lifting slightly. I nodded. In the fireplace. You'll find what's left. I also have photos. And there's more, but I think you should see the footage first. They followed me toward the main hallway where the console sat. Grandpa hovered behind us, wringing his hands. The younger officer tapped a few keys. The screen blinked once, then again. It's not there, he said. What do you mean? I asked. No footage for today. Grandpa coughed. It's been glitchy all month. Probably reset again. I turned to him slowly. It's funny how family cameras only malfunction when we need them. The senior officer checked the system logs. His face stayed neutral, but his voice shifted. Deleted manually. 2 hours ago. Dead silence. No one said a thing. Not Astria, not Grandpa, not Cressida. The younger officer turned to me. May we look at your photos? I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. He scrolled through, pausing longer on the name tag, the cropped photo in the hallway, the barcode on the wrapping paper. He handed it back without saying much, but his eyes said enough. Cressida tried once more, her tone brittle. Officer, please, this is all just a misunderstanding. My daughter has always had a flair for theatrics. I cut in. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm reporting patterns. He nodded slowly. You're not wrong. Patterns are how we prosecute. I felt it then. Not victory, not satisfaction, but clarity. There was no going back. The line had been drawn, and I hadn't just crossed it, I'd carved it in stone. The officer's partner leaned over and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he walked over to Vera, who stood behind Elowen, hands folded tightly in front of her. He lowered his voice. Ma'am, were you ever harmed in this house? She didn't speak. She just nodded, once. Vera didn't move for a long time. The officer's question still lingered in the room like smoke from a fire no one wanted to admit they'd started. Were you ever harmed in this house? I didn't expect her to answer. Not in front of all of them. Not with Grandpa seated 5 feet away, staring at the carpet like it would rearrange itself into something easier to look at. But then, quietly, barely louder than the ticking of the wall clock, Vera nodded. Once. A crack opened in the floor beneath all of us, even if no one else felt it yet. The silence wasn't protective anymore. It was evidence. The officer stepped back, respectful but firm. Thank you, ma'am. No one knew where to look. Cressida took a step back like the air had shifted around her and made it hard to breathe. Grandpa's fingers clutched the edge of his chair like he was trying to hold on to something that was slipping fast. Vera cleared her throat, shaky at first, then steady. It was the attic. Winter of '89, I was 16. He said I was making it up. You all said I was emotional. You called it a phase. Elowen was clinging to her now, her small fingers wrapped around Vera's wrist. Narina stepped closer to me. I didn't touch her. I didn't have to. We don't dig up what's been buried, Cressida muttered from across the room. I turned, my voice flat. Maybe that's why it still rots the house. The officer pulled a small evidence bag from his jacket. We were able to retrieve one file from the damaged USB, he said. We'd like to show it now. He nodded to his partner, who connected a device to the flat screen above the mantel. The video was grainy. No sound. A single frame. The guest bathroom. A static shot from inside the vent. Elowen turned her face into Vera's coat. Isolde screamed, stumbling back against the dining table. What kind of pervert brings this into our home? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. Maybe it didn't come in, I said. Maybe it never left. Astria moved then, quickly, 2 steps toward the screen, but the officer held out an arm. Don't! His jaw clenched. You think I'm the villain? He snapped, eyes wild now. You have no idea what I've done for this family. No, I said, I don't, because all anyone's ever talked about is what you've given, not what you've taken. Grandpa stood up slowly. I thought it was disconnected, he said, his voice a whisper. He said it was just for security. I turned to him. And you didn't wonder why anyone needed a security camera in a bathroom? He didn't respond. He sat back down. The senior officer stepped forward, holding a file. We'll need formal statements from everyone present, he said. And I do have to ask. He looked at me directly. Is there a reason your sister's husband purchased 3 additional hidden cameras last month? And that was the moment my knees buckled. Not from shock, but because everything finally made sense. I didn't need time to think. When the officer asked about the cameras, those 3 extra purchases, I answered without hesitation. He's done it before, I said. I just never had proof. Not until now. The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was recognition. One of the officers opened a folder. There was a complaint filed 2 years ago, he said. A minor female. Report listed Astria Wynne as the subject of concern. The report was labeled inconclusive. The file was sealed shortly after. My chest tightened. What's the name? He showed me the page. I read it once. And again. It was a name I hadn't heard in years, but one I couldn't forget. A girl from a family friend's circle. She came to a holiday party, quiet, polite. I remembered how she refused to use the bathroom all evening, insisting she could wait. No one asked why. Now I knew. The room held its breath. Isolde's voice cracked before the rest of her did. You told me it was over, she cried. You said we'd moved past it, Astria snapped. I buried it. For you, for this family. He spun toward her, his voice rising, wild and sharp. You think I wanted this? You think I did it for fun? I did it to protect us. Grandpa, sitting stiff in his chair, whispered just loud enough to be heard. I thought it was just a misunderstanding. Back then. Cressida took a step forward. Maybe we all misunderstood, she said, her tone desperate. Things were different. People get confused. I turned to her. You always made us swallow poison and call it peace. Not anymore. The moment cracked. Elowin, who had been sitting quietly beside Vera, stood and walked over to the nearest officer. Her small fingers tugged at his sleeve. I think he tried to hurt someone, she said. I think he was going to hurt me too. Everything stopped. The officer knelt, eye level with her. It's okay, he said softly. You're safe now. Isolde collapsed into Vera's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. And Vera didn't speak. She just held her. I turned to Narina and knelt to zip up her coat. She didn't ask where we were going. She didn't need to. We walked toward the foyer. I looked at Cressida. She stood like a statue, unmoving. This isn't my home anymore, I said, and it never will be again. She didn't argue. Her silence was finally honest. My hand reached the door handle just as another officer entered, holding a clipboard and a thin envelope. We've got a signed warrant, he said. We need to check the attic, basement, and any locked storage. I didn't look back, but I heard the sound of Grandpa's cane falling to the floor as they asked him for his keys. 12 minutes after the officers took the warrant upstairs, I heard the thud of something heavy hitting floorboards, the kind of sound that doesn't come from a forgotten suitcase or an old trunk. It was deliberate, like truth falling through drywall. The officer who found it called down for a plastic evidence bag. I stayed in the living room, arms folded, not for warmth, but to hold myself still. Narina sat on the stairs with Elowin. They colored together in silence, pages balanced on their knees, crayons scattered like breadcrumbs across the hardwood. Vera sat between them, like a fence. Not in the way, but shielding. When the officers came down, one of them carried a steel lockbox. He set it on the table in front of me and clicked it open. Photos, cash receipts, a flash drive in a sandwich bag, and an envelope, cream-colored, embossed with a legal firm's logo I knew all too well. It was the same firm that had buried the file on the girl from 2 years ago. One of the officers flipped the documents toward me. Gag order, he said quietly. Dated February. Client sealed it in exchange for settlement. Signature redacted on our copy. Not anymore. Cressida remained in the corner, silent as a ghost. Isolde sat, arms hanging limp, mascara bleeding into her sweater collar. Grandpa hadn't moved since Vera's confession. And Astria, he was pacing now, like a man looking for an exit that didn't exist. Vera had started muttering again, mostly to herself. We could have stopped this. We all saw it. We saw the way he looked at her. No one wanted to believe it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I leaned closer to the officer. I have something else. I unlocked my phone, opened the cloud app linked to my encrypted drive, and showed him the alert I'd received earlier. It was a sync confirmation, an automatic ping triggered when a file I'd backed up months ago matched a new one uploaded to the cloud. The file was from the flash drive they'd just found, and it contained a threat, digital, time-stamped, a message to another woman, different name, different city, 3 weeks ago. You sure this came from him? The officer asked. I nodded. He used the same IP address to log into my shared drive years ago, That's how I found it. I've kept everything. He studied me for a moment. He didn't stop. No, I said. He just got better at hiding. Another officer stepped outside to make a call. The door stayed open, and cold air swept through the room, curling around everyone like a warning. There was no more yelling, no more accusations, just the sound of shoes shifting on wood, of paper being bagged, of shame setting into skin. I watched it all like a witness to my own life. Detached, but aware. There wasn't a single scream, I thought. No glass shattering, no slammed doors, just the unraveling. The real wreckage comes quiet, like breath after crying. I heard Narina giggle softly. Elowen had drawn a dog with antlers. It looked nothing like Ollie, but both girls laughed like they were somewhere else, somewhere better. Vera didn't say a word, but she placed her hand on their backs, gentle, steady. The officers began moving evidence toward the door. As one of them zipped the bag shut, he turned back toward me. "Ms. Quaid," he said, his voice lower than before, "if you hadn't stopped that gift from being opened, you know what we'd be looking at right now?" I nodded once. Because yes, I knew exactly what would have been left behind. The knock came soft, but the weight behind it made everyone shift. It was 1:10 p.m. on Christmas Day when the officer re-entered with a sealed envelope in one hand and the slow certainty of someone who had come to end a chapter. He handed the envelope to his partner, then looked at me. "Astria Wynne is being taken into custody," he said. "Multiple charges, some of them federal." His tone held no sympathy, no gloating, just finality. Then, like an afterthought that had the weight of consequence, "And Seraphine Harlow will be interviewed under formal advisement." No one asked why. The living room was colder than before. Not from the draft, though the front door had been left slightly ajar, but because something had cracked open that couldn't be closed again. I stood beside the dining table, watching as an officer opened the contents of the envelope. "This was found on the flash drive," he said, flipping the screen of his tablet to face me. "An order for surveillance equipment, purchased under a fake name, but traced to Mr. Wynn's credit profile." He swiped again. "Here's the installation instructions he sent himself, forwarded to another email, one that matches Mr. Harlow's old provider account." My grandfather didn't deny it. He didn't speak at all. The officer continued, as if reading a weather report. "We believe Mr. Harlow wasn't the installer, but he was aware. At minimum, he failed to report what he knew." I didn't flinch. I didn't ask questions. "He never had the strength to do it," I said. "But he had enough to let it happen." Cressida didn't argue. Isolde stared at the carpet. No one reached for anyone. They say when justice arrives, it should feel like balance restoring itself. This didn't feel like balance. It felt like aftermath. The officer who had taken my phone earlier handed it back. "We might need you again," he said gently. "But you've already done more than most ever do." "Will it go to court?" I asked. He paused. "Likely. There'll be testimony, discovery. It'll take time." I nodded. "Time we've got." In the kitchen, I heard soft laughter. Vera was sitting at the table with Narina and Elowen, watching them dunk marshmallows into mugs of cocoa like the world hadn't just been carved in half. Somehow they were untouched by the weight of what had just happened. Or maybe they were carrying it in a different way, one that didn't make noise. I stepped outside for air. The driveway was damp, the sky still overcast. Sable Mercer stood near her mailbox, leash in hand, her old beagle sniffing the frozen grass. She saw me and walked over, hesitant. "I saw the lights earlier," she said. I just looked at her. "I wanted to say something for years," she whispered. "I didn't know how." There was a pause. "But thank you for not staying quiet like we all did." I smiled faintly. "Truth doesn't need to yell," I said. "It just needs someone not afraid to speak it." She nodded, eyes glassy, then turned back to her porch. Back in the car, Narina was asleep against the window, cheek pressed to the glass. The heater hummed low. The air was still thick with the scent of pine needles and cinnamon. I checked my phone. One unread voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. A male voice, distorted but clear. You think it's over? You've only slowed it down. And that's when I realized surviving the truth was only step one. Now I had to live with it. The first sound I heard that morning was the scrape of snow being shoveled off the sidewalk. The second was Narina's steady breath beside me, a small patch of warmth tucked under the blanket on our friend Yara's pull-out couch. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet for December 26th. No distant laughter, no arguing over leftovers, just stillness. The kind that seeps into your skin when everything inside you is finally beginning to settle. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe. The voicemail played in my mind again. Those words from a stranger. You think it's over? You've only slowed it down. But this time, I didn't save it. I hit delete without hesitation. A threat only has power if you let it rent space in you. And I'd evicted worse than a coward hiding behind a blocked number. I checked my phone, not for messages but for silence. The absence of noise was finally comforting. Then the screen lit up. One new text. Cressida. No matter what happened, you didn't have to humiliate us. No, are you okay? No, how's Narina? Just that. I stared at it for a moment, long enough to feel the old reflex tug, apologize, smooth it over, explain. But that reflex was dull now, like a nerve that had stopped responding to pain. I hit block. Then I opened the family group thread. The last message was from my uncle, something bland about eggnog and how the punch bowl had gone missing. I scrolled past it all, then tapped delete. When silence is used to protect harm, breaking it isn't betrayal, it's repair. The living room light spilled gold across the floor. I made coffee, folded the blanket back over Narina, and stepped out onto the porch in Yara's old hoodie. My breath clouded in front of me. The snow had softened every sound. Sable Mercer walked past with her dog, Ollie. He barked once, then came closer, wagging his tail. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. You okay? She asked. Getting there, I said. She stopped, tightening her scarf. You did what none of us could, she said. And maybe that's what makes you the most dangerous. I raised an eyebrow. And the most free. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true. I wasn't trying to burn bridges, I said. I just got tired of crossing the ones that always collapsed beneath me. She nodded. I hope she knows, she said, glancing inside, what you gave up to protect her. She doesn't yet, I said. But she will. Sable gave a soft goodbye and walked on. I stood there for a while longer, listening to the kind of silence that didn't make me flinch. Back inside, Narina stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. Mom. Her voice was quiet. Why does everyone hate you now? I sat beside her, brushed a hand through her hair. I didn't rush the answer. Because I told the truth when no one else would, I said. And some people hate the truth more than they hate lies. She looked down, then wrapped her arms around my waist. I don't hate you, she said. I'm proud of you. I hugged her tight. Me too, baby. Me too. Later that morning, while she played with Elowen in the other room, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the pale winter light. I opened a new document. Title: Formal Custody Petition, Protective Order Consideration. And just like that, I realized I wasn't just leaving them. I was building something new. The courtroom wasn't packed, but the air felt dense. I sat in the back row, not because I was hiding, but because I'd had enough of being the center of someone else's storm. The polished wood paneling, the echo of chairs shifting, the crisp voice of the bailiff calling the room to order, it all felt strangely calming. Astria sat at the defendant's table in a gray suit that didn't quite fit anymore. He looked smaller, or maybe just more visible. The judge didn't waste words. This is not a case about a holiday misunderstanding, he said, voice firm and focused. This is about premeditation cloaked in family tradition. There were no gasps. No one from the family was there to offer statements. But the gallery wasn't empty. One woman spoke from the stand, hands trembling only once. Another followed, her voice low, eyes never leaving Astria. They were strangers to me, but not to him. and that mattered more than anything. When the flash drive was entered into evidence, the courtroom tech pulled up a page, an order placed under a fake name, shipping to a P.O. box just 20 minutes from the house. Another image followed, a PDF of install instructions, forwarded to an email address I'd seen too many times. Grandpa's. He wasn't in the courtroom, but his presence lingered in the digital trail, undeniable. He never pressed record, but he never asked who did either. When the judge issued a restraining order against him, barring all contact with minors in the family, he didn't contest it. A written statement was submitted instead. I thought turning away was mercy, but it was just cowardice. That was the closest thing to accountability he would ever offer. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, I just breathed. Afterward, I filed the last piece of paperwork, full custody of Narina. It wasn't contested. There was no one left to argue. I started volunteering at a local trauma center a week later. Not to tell my story, but to sit in the room with others who needed someone who wouldn't flinch when the truth got ugly. Vera spoke at a community forum that month, her first public words on what happened. Isolde didn't come. She'd moved out, living quietly now in another county. I didn't blame her for disappearing. I just hoped she learned how to stay visible for her daughter. At the forum, Vera ended her speech with this: "Justice isn't about anger, it's about making sure it doesn't happen again." It landed like gospel. One Thursday afternoon, Narina came home with a crumpled piece of paper. She tossed her backpack onto the kitchen chair and handed it to me. "Emergency contact form," she said. "They want us to update. Can I just use your last name now? Quaid only." I looked up. "You can use whatever name you want," I told her, "but I'll always know you as mine." That night, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, one line scribbled in pen. "You were right. I was scared too." I didn't need to know who sent it. I didn't need them to follow up. I folded the note and slipped it into a file labeled "Silence That Ended." Sometimes victory doesn't look like applause. Sometimes it's just never having to flinch again. Weeks later, I watched Narina and Eloin chase each other around a soggy patch of snow in the park. The sky was still pale, the ground still muddy, but the ice was finally melting. I sat on the bench, arms wrapped around a thermos, and said to no one in particular, "If your name is the only truth you have left, carve it into something that doesn't burn,